Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo joins me today on Cold Coffee as she prepares to leave office after 2 terms leading the nation's 3rd largest county. During her tenure, she guided Harris County through a series of major crises, from the COVID-19 pandemic and chemical spills to repeated flooding and extreme weather, while also pushing for long-term reforms in infrastructure, transparency, and economic development. Today, we're going to talk about her time in office, the scrutiny that came with it, and what she believes Harris County needs next. So, Judge Hidalgo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Totally. So before we get into your time as judge, I do want to ask you, some voters have been confused about some of the latest endorsements, first backing Christian Menifee in the 18th Congressional District race, and then endorsing Congressman Al Green. Can you explain to me your thought behind these 2 different endorsements for essentially the same role?
Absolutely. And I get the confusion. It's such a bizarre situation, right? And I won't get into how we ended up here, but it's just a series of unexpected events. And so first, it was a race between Christian Menifee and Amanda Edwards. And of course, Christian Menifee is our county attorney. I have a lot of experience with him. Mm-hmm. And then the race became between Christian Menifee and Congressman Al Green. It's a very confusing situation, period. And we got there because of a series of unique events. But what it turned into is there was a race between Christian Menifee and Amanda Edwards, and I endorsed in that race. And then now the race is between Christian Menifee and Congressman Al Green. And Congressman Green and I have worked very closely together, right? You think about COVID. I remember touring the vaccination centers with him when that first was developed, any number of issues that we've had with the federal government. And so while I think Christian's a great candidate, the congressman is someone I know very, very, very well and can vouch for. And so it wasn't even an option to not support him. Mm-hmm. But I get it. I mean, it's bizarre. The whole thing is bizarre.
What about some people that might say have concerns about, needing new, young, fresh voices coming to this role? What are your thoughts on that? How, as somebody who entered into the political landscape very young?
For sure. I mean, I see the irony myself, right? When I ran, it was very much like little girl, right? I always said if it was a young man, as it was with some of the predecessors, it's, a very brave and creative young man. It's different when it's a woman. But either way, I believe in changes in leadership, which is also why I'm not pursuing a 3rd term. In this case, my personal decision has to do with how well I know these 2 individuals and how much I've worked with them. And that's what it came down to. And, I could have stayed out of the race. That was certainly a possibility. I just felt so strongly about Congressman Green, and we've been good friends, and I just couldn't not support him. It was really more of a friendship thing, and I also think he can continue doing the job. But of course, I share that general sense that change is good. Fresh perspectives are good.
It's interesting how we're already talking about how you were very young when you became Harris County Judge. I think you were the youngest elected position ever in Harris County, coming into that role. How does that feel now that your time is wrapping up in December? And what's next?
Yes, so I joke with people. I have 3 white hairs, they're there though. And when I came in, I was the youngest person in my office, just period. Mm-hmm. And so over the years, it's been easy to see sort of the aging because I'm not the youngest person in the office anymore. You know, we have plenty of people who are younger, and I've learned a lot. And no matter how much I studied and the varied experiences that I had growing up and at the beginning of my career, I didn't have all of the experience to lead a county this size. And so, you know, some of the conversations I have with my staff is just the kind of leader that I was and the kind of leader that I am. And that comes with experience. So I'm very happy about where I am, and I'm very excited about this year. I think it's going to go by way too fast. I can't believe it's already February. But I'm so excited. My team's really excited and committed. And I actually, a man was elected county judge at a younger age. So I was elected 27. I believe he was elected 24.
Okay.
The father of the Astrodome. But see, again, it's different. If you look at the news clippings, then there's no kind of little boy insinuation. But you gotta one step at a time.
Looking at your career, defining moment was COVID. You were very much in the midst of that, at the forefront of it. Post-COVID, looking at that time to now, are you where you thought you'd be politically?
I never really had thoughts of where I would be politically. I know around the time of COVID and my re-election, there were a lot of conversations about what I could and could not do. I was just so focused and have continued to be focused on the here and now because there's been so much. I mean, there was no space for me to think about anything else. And when I was running for re-election, right, I was running a campaign. I was running the county. I always say my third job was fighting against Kim Mogg's political prosecution, which of course ended up being dismissed by Ken Paxton, the Attorney General. And so it's like I had 3 jobs, right? So all I was trying to do is get reelected as county judge. My mind can't even go to anywhere else. Where I am, perhaps not necessarily I wish I could have been, is on I think that we have left some really important pro-community, pro-Harris County achievements on the table because of this, what I believe is a poor decision-making by the majority of the court when it comes to financial issues. And so I didn't expect that, right? It was a big win. It was all hands on deck, and we have been less efficient during my second term than we were during my first term, but there's still a lot that I'm proud of.
Why do you think that is? Because usually the first time around it feels like you're just learning the ropes. The second time around, you know what is you're doing. You understand the processes. You've lived through it. Why do you think your second term has been less efficient than your first?
I mean, I think a lot of people will identify themselves with this. Like, I'm the kind of person that will just go. Like, I'll figure it out. I'll get it done. So I remember having a conversation with my colleague Rodney Ellis early on about, he knew Governor Ann Richards, and she talked about how she was going to govern that first term as if she weren't going to have a second. And, plenty of people said, Lina, slow down, you're going to burn out. Of course, I did burn out. I in retrospect, I don't know was the right decision or not, but I was absolutely operating as though that was my only term, and I didn't stop. And sure, there was things I was learning, but I'm resourceful enough and a quick enough learner that we just got things done. The second time around, it wasn't so much about experience. It's a lot easier for me to navigate things. And that's part of also why I was like, I don't need to be here for more years, because a lot of it is just almost too much like muscle memory. But it's just the way that the politics of the court shifted. And so the priorities have shifted from, what we were trying to do is really structural reform, making sure the county had a proper budget process, had a long-term vision, had focused on really being accountable when it came to flood projects, et cetera, to this emphasis, as I see it, on giving funds to those organizations, individuals that endorse in elections. And so that, of course, there's only so much money, so either give it there or give it here. So that's been, I'm in the minority. Nobody likes to be in the minority, but we still have gotten a lot done. And I most importantly for me, And I think that if you ask sort of what's your legacy, I think this is it, even though nobody can really write it down and it's not sexy and it's not something I can run on in the future, is reforming the way the county awards contracts to companies. It's very much at the heart of county government and at the heart of what county government can achieve for its people in very, very tangible ways. And I'm happy to provide examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Provide us some examples of that so people can understand when you're talking about that would be something that would be a part of your legacy, that they can connect that with it.
Yeah, so let's talk about flooding, right? Hurricane season will be here before we know it. We all have those battle scars from the various floods. And what helps us deal with those is the flood control projects, right? The better bayous and channels and detention basins. Voters passed a $2.5 billion bond in 2018, right before I was elected. And they were promised a list of projects. The projects, the final list that everybody agreed on is not going to all get done. There's over 20 projects that are important, that were approved, that have no funding right now. And it's something that I don't think has gotten enough attention. So put that on the one hand. Then let's look at how these contracts are awarded. Mm-hmm. So unlike any other county or city that we could find anywhere in the country, Harris County, since the late 70s, has been awarding contracts in a way that's not up to par. So for flood control projects and for engineering projects, which is roads, bridges, sidewalks, etc., there has not been any kind of process, right? Normally, anybody can tell you this. I mean, you don't have to have had experience with this to know. There's a committee and there's requirements, selection criteria.
Some oversight.
Right, some oversight and some sort of criteria that you compare different applicants to. And then there's a record of, who was interviewed and who scored what. And why this particular company was selected. Well, in Harris County for all these years, there has not been any of that. No record at all.
So you're saying there's no bidding process?
There hasn't been. And that is written out in a report that the county auditor wrote a year or two ago. I'd been digging on this for years. Mm-hmm. It was sort of thrown off the scent many times. And then finally we figured it out on the second term. So I think that's really the most impactful thing. And none of this is an exaggeration, Celeste. So the only explanation there is for how these contracts have been awarded, some sort of phone call, because there's nothing, there is zero written down about who got it, why, who interviewed whom, nothing. And we're talking billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And this is very much not standard. It's legal, shouldn't be. But, and then on the other hand, you realize that there's unlimited contribution. There are no contribution limits to county commissioners and executives. Mm-hmm. So let's put those on the table. We have money that we need to finish flood control projects that people were promised, and we have a lack of a system. I mean, I think it's pretty valid to say if we had a proper system to award contracts, it would be more efficient. It would be more cost savings. Mm-hmm. And you can pretty much bet that there would be more progress on the projects.
So it's interesting. Judge Hidalgo, as we sit here and we talk to you, and I talk to you, you've gone through multiple things and processes, from the logistics of how the system works, trying to figure out the system and making it better, to then also navigating crisis. What of all of those things tested your leadership the most?
Definitely COVID. I mean, it was unreal for all of us. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And, I was remembering, for example, the first stay-home order. We were just, we stayed at the Emergency Operations Center with the winter weather. And I remember I was on the phone with Mayor Turner at the time. My advisors were academics from Rice University, not bone in their body that was political in any way, which is why I chose them. And so we got on the phone. Then we got on the phone with all the other mayors in Harris County's 34 mayors. And we just were, making it up as we went. That's all we could do based on the academic feedback, based on the experience that we all had with our communities. We said, okay, this is what we're going to put on the stay-home order. And then, of course, we go and I remember I presented to the media, and then they started asking, well, does this apply to that? I don't know. We're all trying to feel our way through this. So, and then when we had the winter freeze on top of COVID, so at the moment I was totally locked in. I feel that I did my very best. Doesn't mean that every decision was perfect, but did my very best. I had an incredible team. I was so dedicated. I mean, I worked all the time, and but in retrospect, it was a very trying time for me as it was for the community.
Why do you think you became such a polarizing figure during that time? When you say that you weren't looking at this from a political standpoint, but you were looking at this from your advisors who you picked that were academics, that were researchers and scientists, why do you think you became a target for criticism in that time?
I think it's just politics, When I won, it was a big deal because a woman had never been elected to the Harris County Commissioner's Court. One had served but not been elected. But it was also a big deal because the party in charge of Harris County switched for the first time in 30 years. And so, and the sense, we were talking about Ann Richards earlier, she, of course, was defeated by George Bush for the governorship. And the precursor to that in sort of the political lore is that the Republicans took control of Harris County, and then they took control of the state. So the fact that the Democrats now took control of Harris County really woke a lot of Republicans and politicos up to say, okay, what's happening here? How do we prevent this from continuing? So understandably, the folks that differ with me in terms of our perspectives and priorities said, we got to take this woman down before she becomes more of a threat. So I think that was it. I think there were valid disagreements on what was proper and not in terms of COVID. Nobody had the absolute truth, but I think it provided a really easy canvas for political opponents and detractors to just put me down a peg for political reasons.
But, focusing on emergency management as the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, what did those years teach you about the limits, strengths, and the strengths of county government?
Yes, I mean, the biggest example of how things were and how things are and where we need to go is the ITC fire. So I've been in office 3 months. And then this fire breaks out at Tank Farm. The fires are, it looked like something out of a Mission Impossible movie. It was just an enormous fire. For folks who weren't here at the time, there was a plume that went all the way from, this was in Deer Park, Southeast Harris County, all the way to Katy. People were getting, gunk on their yards all the way there. And the firefighters had not seen anything like that. So you're seeing all this, you're figuring, well, what's the quality of the air? Well, Harris County didn't have the proper air monitors, and the company was taking readings, but see, the company's the culprit. We're supposed to be the watchdog. So we borrowed air monitoring equipment from the city, so that just shows the importance of collaboration. Then we made the largest investment in pollution control, environmental monitoring that Harris County had seen. So, there goes the modernizing. We had a new director of the pollution control department who hadn't sort of been beaten down into not asking for anything, sort of really that looking to the future. But at the same time, you compare that to the floods where I know we could have done better, the funding that's been taken away from the pollution control department. The fundamental piece is collaboration, practicing when there's a blue sky day. We get along so well with our dozens of partners, various organizations. When it's an emergency, by definition, it's a crisis. It's not perfect, the response, but everybody just feels this camaraderie. Everybody can sort of talk in a very efficient way. We try to lift each other up. We do the best we can, but some of it also depends on the systems, on the actual physical infrastructure funding that exists on the ground. We might have the very best collaboration, very best people, but if we don't have the air monitoring equipment, we're stuck.
Right. So as I hear you talk about all of these going from one crisis to the next, what does the in-between look like? What does an average day look like for the county judge?
That's what's amazing that I'm really proud of is I think I could talk about all the emergencies and that could be like the job, right?
Yeah.
But we've been able to do so much. So while homelessness grew during COVID, we reduced it by 20%. We launched this beautiful early childhood program, 60,000 kids, proof of concept. We just got the second independent evaluation. Like, obviously, kids in school, good. Kids not in school, bad. We've done a lot of workforce training. So these jobs that we know we need more workers at, really training folks in that. And then and we have made progress on this ethics piece. So last year, when this all came to light, I tried to rally public support, and that's also why I wanted to talk to you today, because I believe the only reason we have made progress there is because of the people's attention on this issue. Otherwise, there's no incentive for the politicians. And so what we did is we went back to Commissioner's Court, and we said, okay, we're going to set up a system. We're going to set up a committee. We're going to write things down. We're going to do what's proper. And so the court voted to do that. Now, we learned this year that it's not actually happening. And the ultimate solution is to put those contracts, or the flood contracts and the engineering contracts, back in the independent department that awards the contracts for everything else, whether it be the hospital, whether it be the jail. It's supposed to be done by an independent department, not by the flood control director, the engineering director, who reports directly to the politicians. Therefore, there's perverse incentives. So what I'm hoping to do before the year is out, that I think is the most lasting impact I can have, is to get basically undo what my predecessors did in 1977, to put the contracts process back into the contracting department, which is independent and insulated from politics.
So who would push back on something that seems pretty straightforward and basic with common sense?
So the pushback, which happened last year, right, when we passed part of it, is, well, the purchasing department doesn't have enough capacity. The contracts might be delayed. And I think, so there's valid concerns. You don't want to do this without preparation. Mm-hmm. But over the course of the year, the purchasing department, the department where everything should go, has a new leader. They have more capacity. Again, like, it's a matter of funding, right? Are we going to give them enough funding to hire people? Or are we going to give all the funding to raises for law enforcement? So it's really whether you want to tie your own hands. And I think that's partly what we're seeing at the federal level is big part of democracy requires tying your own hands. And so it means asking that of my colleagues. I understand it could be a big ask, but see, none of us want to put the county at risk, our own reputations at risk, or the public's. But then you also see that they raise enormous amounts of money from these engineering companies and companies that perform the flood control work. Their coffers are orders of magnitude larger than the political coffers of elected officials in counties of relatively the same size. So, so I think that's where, the public needs to be that weight for. It's not just me saying, hey, tie your own hands, trust me, but people saying, look, you're still going to get donations, right? They do still in other counties. Just instead of getting 10 million, they get 2 million, right? And let's do this properly. And that's just better in general. It's better for investment. It's better for systems. It's better for efficiency, for cost savings, you name it.
So then how do you balance the transparency that you're talking about with the urgency of wanting to move projects forward based on what residents want to happen? How do you reconcile all of that?
I think you have to just make sure that the systems are in place. The current system's not perfectly effective. There are some folks that don't get paid on time, and it's something we're working on. And but it's not a proper excuse right now. I think it's an easy talking point, but people should want there to be proper competition in the way that contracts are selected. And the easiest way to say this is sort of contrived is to realize that we're the only county that does it that way. We could not find another county in the country that does it that way. Our auditor talked to their auditors, and they were absolutely baffled. And so, it's about, let's make sure they have the money they need to get through this. Maybe there will be a little bit of a growing pain. I don't really think so. But even if it were, it's worth it. It's just very, very basic governance.
I want to stay on the line of transparency, but I want to shift it a little bit. On the topic of transparency, this has been something that you have championed as a judge. Do you feel your openness about your own journey with mental health was the right decision?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, for starters, like I'm really bad at lying. I can't do it. I really can't. And that's part of the reason why I was so public about my split from my husband, right? Because people kept asking, how's married life? And I couldn't be like, it's great, because it wasn't, right? And so I was like, I just need to come out with this. And so that was part of it. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. But even like the minute I started my leave, I said, I want to put out a statement that says what's going on, because I knew that this would help somebody. When Senator John Fetterman took his leave for depression after a heart attack, I remember reading about him in Time magazine. And at the time, I was in a really dark place. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the support I needed medically or otherwise. And reading that article is what gave me the idea to say, wait a minute, no, I deserve more help. I can do something. And since then, I've heard from many people who echo that same thing. And I also know from talking to professionals, from talking to other folks with mental illness, that the more we talk about it, the less stigma there is. I know people try to use it against me. I don't think it's effective. I really don't. I mean, I think that everybody else kind of hears it and rolls their eyes, because we're at a point where like you might pretend like you don't have a mental illness and maybe you don't, but at least you know somebody who does, or somebody in your family does. I mean, the statistics, especially post-COVID, are very high.
Yeah. Was there anybody during that time, or in any time as judge, that really stood out to you, that surprised you as somebody that was an encouragement, that gave you a word of encouragement, or, just surprised you?
A lot of people, people from both parties. I don't know that this person would want me to name him, but it was a prominent figure from the opposing party. There were people that I knew very well, community leaders, supporters of mine, that told me about their struggles. A lot of my counterparts, other county executives in large counties, they shared how they worked through their issues. I mean, it's a really hard job. It is. And so odds are, even if you didn't have a mental illness before, like you've got something going on now. And so how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
So I was pleasantly surprised all around. I really was. People have recently taken to sort of trying to bring it back up, but I just don't think it catches on. It just doesn't.
Mm-mm. You kind of touched about this, about your legacy a little bit, and you still have until December. What do you want in these last months to look like for you in your role still as the judge?
So we've done a lot of work in partnership with other governmental entities, nonprofits. Obviously, always have partnerships and incentives for the business sector, but I've really found my footing in promoting Harris County abroad and recruiting more investment. So we were in Taiwan and Japan for a trade mission in late October. So two of the big companies we visited in Taiwan were Foxconn and Inventec. Foxconn we've all heard about because they make part of the iPhone. So that's you kind of know that name. And then Inventec, they make like the Kindle. They make laptops, and then the company puts their logo on it. So we go and we meet with these people, and the investments that they were going to have in Harris County, they've now committed to growing, and they've committed to building new plants in Harris County. And that's because we met, and they now have like a window, like one window that they can stop at, is how they phrased it at Foxconn, and where we help them navigate how to expand. We have a conversation about workforce. And so, I mean, it's amazing. It's like, a lot of communities are hosting these AI server farms, and they take a lot of water and a lot of energy, but they bring employment. For us, we're building the servers here, and so it's like we get the upside of the AI revolution without having those very severe environmental issues. And so I want to continue doing that. I want to really expand those economic ties and bring more jobs and businesses here. I want to see the the ethics reform through. Very important to me. It's going to depend on the extent to which I can get the community interested in something that's like, eyes glazed over kind of thing. And then there's a couple other issues that we're interested in. The stray dog population, intractable, very interesting, very important issue in some of our poorest communities. They're just terrorized by these dogs, but they also don't like to have them neutered for cultural reasons. Yeah. Human trafficking, and so that's basically it. But I would say sort of the most sort of structural stuff, getting through emergencies, ethics reform, and then more focus on economic development and real outcomes from that.
Sure. So looking at 2027, what do you think the next Harris County judge needs to be successful from a political standpoint, but also from a governing standpoint?
I think it's very simple. It's about financial management. I will confess, another factor in my not wanting to run again is, just what a terrible fiscal situation the county's in, and that's sort of against my despite my opposition. Obviously, I wasn't effective enough to recruit additional opposition. There was only 2 of us, but with the state's policies toward Harris County, which limit our ability to collect revenue. There's going to be a legislative session again. Next year is probably going to limit that even more. The funding that has been spent that we don't have just this year already, $4 million more were requested by the budget director for this massive pay raise I was given. And so I said, well, where do we get $4 million from? I said, well, we're going to have some savings once we stop having to send inmates to Louisiana because our jail is full. It's like, okay, so we're spending money with money that we're not sure is going to come or when, right? So I think the incoming county judge has to really stand on their own 2 feet and be that source of accountability to say, wait a minute, let's not make this worse. In fact, let's try to fix it. And it may not be politically popular, but I actually think they can win re-election with that. I mean, people want government to work. That's where the apathy comes from. And eventually it's going to work less, and eventually they're going to have to raise taxes. And, mark my words on that one. And so I just rather we be transparent about it and we tackle it. And, the mayor already sort of alluded to a tax hike. Harris County basically copied what the city did. So it just needs to be clearly addressed.
Mm-hmm. Do you plan on endorsing anybody for the Harris County judge role?
I know it's not right now. Of course, the race is not for a month or so. So I'm not going to say absolutely not, but not right now.
So let's say an outlier comes in, a young woman comes to you, is listening to us right now, and says, you know what? I want to get into politics. I want a champion for my community. What advice would you give them?
Do it. I mean, they do. And I'm like, yeah, go for it. And what I tell them is there's never going to be a good time. Few people, like maybe they're recruited to run, and then they're already known. And so people with money or sort of embrace them and help them raise the money. And that's very rare. Odds are whoever wants to run, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be financially challenging. It's not going to be guaranteed. You might do everything perfectly and still lose, or vice versa. And so I tell folks, if you want to run, just you could wait your whole life for it to be the perfect moment. And then the folks that are elected, there are several elected officials that I try to mentor in terms of, let me put everything in perspective for you to realize that you don't need to kill yourself doing this job. I mean, it's like nothing's on fire right now. It's a job. It's important. But I mean, just the level of trauma and stress that exists among elected officials that come at it for the right reasons, but just are not able to find any kind of balance. So it took me a while to find it. Yeah. I think I'm there now, and so I want to try to show folks a little bit more of what that looks like.
What guiding principles shaped your decisions most during your time as a judge?
So one thing I always tell my team is err on the side of transparency, period. Easy to kind of hold things back, but just don't. And then, talking to experts, talking to people who come at the same issue from a different standpoint. Like, I can talk to my pollution control advisors, I can talk to my public health people, but I also will find someone from industry, and I'll find someone from academia. And I always want those angles. And then, just really, really trying hard to not let the politics influence, and I've said this before, the one decision I made where the politics took over is a decision I deeply regret. And that was when we did the census and it was time for Harris County to redraw the boundaries of its commissioner precincts. You're supposed to do that every 10 years just to make sure the population size is the same in each precinct. And there was a way to do it that made sense. And then there was a way to do it that would give us the possibility of bringing another Democrat into the court. And it was terribly contrived. I mean, it was so obvious. And I was told, as I've been told many times, Lina, if you don't do this, you're never going to win again. The party's going to abandon you. And before then, I'd been told this, and I'd just been like, you know what? If they want to abandon me, they can abandon me. And since then, same thing. But at that point, I gave in. I was not comfortable. I said it at court. I said, this is political, but I need to do it. And it's just really, bit me in the back since then. So I've just been real firm of like, look, I think the majority of the voters clearly appreciate that I'm almost not naive, but I'm not trying to be like a great political mastermind. I'm just trying to do what I think is best based on the information I have, and I try to tell elected officials, like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to make all these political decisions. Like, you can win by just being you. And I'd like to bring more of that approach to government.
Based on what you just said, do you think true transparency can live within politics?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. I think certainly more transparency than we have now. There's always going to be things like, there's other companies that are looking to come to Harris County that we interacted with during our trade missions, but I can't share what their names are because we shared an NDA, right? So there's always going to be something like that.
Right.
But I think it can be done. A perfect example, these lawsuits we're facing from mothers of young men that died in the jail. Jail is pretrial. They've not been convicted of a crime. They were arrested, mostly minor things. They had a medical episode and they died. And so, we're at Commissioner's Court and I get a note, don't apologize, because otherwise they're gonna win the lawsuit. I'm like, sure, but like that's not my goal is not for them to not win the lawsuit. Like, my point is, like, it is a problem, so I am going to apologize. And if they win the lawsuit, like, good,
Yeah.
So it's just kind of bringing that openness and common sense as opposed to like really confusing things, because then you end up with a lot of inconsistencies. And I could go on forever about the inconsistencies that we have now. You're just twisting yourself into knots. I think it can be victorious. I don't know if it's necessarily the best strategy. I mean, I think in politics it's very easy to say, the ends justify the means. I'm a great person. I'm going to make it far if I, manipulate this and that. That's just a difference in perspective. That's not, to me, that would make it really hard for me, and I would just not feel right about it. But I think that both paths can get you there.
So after everything you've experienced, do you still have confidence in public service? And are you going to stay in public service?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. And I need more people. We all need more people to come into public service who are not going to, get to the seat and get amnesia. That's something else I borrowed from a colleague. I mean, it's amazing to see how people change. Just unbelievable. Some people I ran with and, put the robe on and you're a totally different person. And so we need more people that are not going to do that. I think that I need a break from this. And I always said I'd do 2 terms, but my hope is to come back and run for office again. That doesn't depend, though, on me, right? It's like whether the people will have me. And so right now what I need to figure out for, after December 31st at 11:59 p.m. of this year, then I turn into a pumpkin. And so the question is, who is Lina Hidalgo when she's not the county judge, right? And so, but I do hope to come back to politics. I like it. I think I figured out how to do it without it, running me ragged. And I enjoy it. I really do.
Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo, thank you so much for joining me on Cold Coffee today.
Thank you.